General Hospital spoilers for Tuesday, January 20th reveal that Britt had never been the type to hesitate, but inviting Jason out again after the chaos of their last date felt like stepping into a fire she wasn't sure she could walk out of. Still, something inside her refused to let go of the possibility maybe foolish, maybe reckless that this time things might finally go right. Maybe this time they wouldn't run into Carly. Maybe this time the shadows of Sidwell, the WSB, Brennan, or the past wouldn't crash into them. Maybe this time she could have one night where she wasn't someone's pawn, someone's patient, or someone's secret. Just a woman wanting a man who made her pulse quicken in a way she hadn't felt in years. And so, with a mix of defiance and desire, Britt sent the message that would set everything in motion. Let's try again. Tonight. Jason saw it while cleaning one of his weapons. The glow of Britt's name on his phone tugging at something inside him. He tried unsuccessfully to ignore. She was trouble. Complicated trouble. The kind of trouble that led to secrets, danger. Risks that had nothing to do with gunfire, but everything to do with feelings he didn't know how to control. But he typed back anyway. The word was simple, sharp, decisive. Yes. And suddenly a night that should have been routine shifted into something electric. Britt spent longer getting ready than she wanted to admit. The woman who once lived in lab coats and surgical gloves now stood in front of a mirror wondering which dress made her look less like a fugitive hiding from half the WSB. Even as she applied makeup with steady hands, her heart raced with the anticipation of something she didn't dare name. Because Britt could feel that this was different. Despite everything unraveling around her, despite the secrets, despite the men who wanted to manipulate her, there was one truth she couldn't deny. Jason made her feel alive in a way danger never could. And tonight, she wanted to taste that feeling without interruption. Jason arrived early, leaning against his motorcycle with that calm, unreadable expression that made people mistake quiet for indifference. Britt saw through it. She knew his stillness was its own form of heat, a tension simmering beneath the surface. And when their eyes met, something charged flickered between them, familiar yet new, fragile yet undeniable. Ready? He asked. She nodded, but what she meant was, I've been ready for this longer than I want to admit. Their destination wasn't a crowded bar or a noisy restaurant. Jason had chosen something unexpected, a quiet rooftop overlooking the harbor, lit only by warm lanterns he'd strung up earlier. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, it was romantic in the Jason sense. Private, safe, just for them. There were takeout boxes waiting, a chilled bottle of wine, and enough distance from the world that for the first time in months, Britt felt like she could breathe. As they sat side by side, the conversation came easier than either expected. Jason didn't press her about Brennan or Sidwell. Britt didn't push him about Carly or the weight he carried. Instead, they let the night soften them, piece by piece. Britt freely laughed when Jason admitted he once tried to cook and nearly set off the Quartermain fire alarms. Jason smirked when Britt insisted she could probably commit several medical felonies just by looking at the questionable seafood in their takeout. But beneath the teasing, beneath the ease, heat simmered. There were moments when Jason's eyes lingered just a second too long. Moments when Britt leaned closer than she needed to. Moments where the air felt too thick, too charged, too full of everything they pretended not to want. And every one of those moments pulled them toward the inevitable. When Jason reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, Britt froze, not from fear, but from the realization of how badly she needed this. Needed him. Needed one night where she wasn't running or hiding or calculating. One night where she allowed herself to want something forbidden, something explosive. Jason hesitated, just for a heartbeat, as if giving her the chance to step away. She didn't. Their lips met like a spark hitting gasoline, fast, hot, consuming. Britt's fingers tangled in the back of his shirt. Jason's hands slid around her waist, pulling her closer with a hunger he rarely let himself show. The kiss deepened, slow then urgent, a release of every tension, every fear, every unspoken desire that had been simmering between them since the night he saved her life. For once, there were no interruptions, no emergencies, no Carly appearing out of nowhere with warnings or judgments, no WSB intel blowing up their moment. Just them, to people who had survived their own brokenness long enough to find each other in the wreckage. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Britt rested her forehead against his and whispered, "Maybe this is how it was supposed to be, before everything got so twisted." Jason didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. His hand at her waist, the way he pulled her closer again, the way his voice finally came out low and rough, "Maybe it still can be," was enough to make Britt's pulse trip into something wild and reckless. And she believed him. For the first time in a long time, Britt allowed herself to hope, allowed herself to imagine a night that didn't end in chaos, allowed herself to wonder if the heat between them could turn into something real, something dangerous in a different way, emotional, vulnerable, impossible to control. Because whatever was happening between them wasn't casual. It wasn't convenience. It was a storm gathering momentum, a fire burning hotter each time they got close, a story neither of them could walk away from anymore. And tonight, beneath the lantern glow and the quiet hum of the harbor, Britt Westburn and Jason Morgan lit the match that would ignite everything. Their chemistry wasn't just returning, it was exploding. Cullum arrived in Port Charles like a force of nature, silent at first, then suddenly everywhere. A presence too large to ignore and too dangerous to underestimate. He didn't announce his authority with speeches or theatrics. He simply stepped into the room and everyone, instinctively, adjusted. A man like him didn't need introductions. Power radiated from him in the tension of his shoulders, the precision of his movements, the steel in his eyes. Brennan felt it immediately. Pascal sensed it even before Cullum spoke. And within hours of his arrival, Port Charles learned the first truth about him. When Cullum issued orders, people obeyed whether they wanted to or not. He began with a list short, terrifyingly direct, and delivered with the calm of someone used to rearranging the lives of others without hesitation. New surveillance protocols, restricted communication lines, tightened access to intelligence pools that Brennan once controlled freely. Pascal's assignments were restructured, his autonomy stripped away layer by layer until he functioned less like an operative and more like a weapon waiting for Cullum's command. And Brennan, who had built his reputation on fearlessness and manipulation, found himself taking orders without a single argument, because one cold look from Cullum made it clear what defiance would cost him. Cullum didn't need to shout to control the room. He dismantled Brennan's influence with a flick of his hand, reshaped Pascal's mission with a tone that allowed no negotiation, and inserted himself into the cracks of the Sidwell investigation with a precision that was almost surgical. He knew things he shouldn't know, details no one had given him, moves no one expected. It was as if Cullum had been watching everything from the shadows long before he arrived, stepping into the center only when the moment was perfect for him to seize control. And he did seize it. He tightened his grip on Brennan first, issuing commands that boxed Brennan into a corner he couldn't escape. Cullum demanded daily reports. He cut Brennan off from key contacts, forced him to surrender classified files, and questioned him with a slow, deliberate intensity that made Brennan feel as though every word was being weighed, measured, and dissected for weakness. The balance of power shifted rapidly, almost violently. Brennan had always been dangerous because he knew people's secrets. Cullum was dangerous because he knew how to use them. Pascal wasn't spared either. If Brennan felt cornered, Pascal felt hunted. Cullum assigned him tasks designed to test loyalty, obedience, and endurance, not physically, but psychologically. He cornered Pascal in empty hallways, stared him down until the silence became torture, and issued orders that seemed designed not only to control him, but to expose the limits of his loyalty to Brennan. Pascal tried to maintain composure, tried to remain the steady operative he had always been. But Cullum saw through him, saw everything. Cullum's rival wasn't an adjustment, it was a takeover. Every command he issued reshaped the hierarchy. Every order he delivered cut deeper into the infrastructure Brennan and Pascal had built. And what terrified them most wasn't the commands themselves, but the sense that Cullum was preparing for something bigger, something darker, something neither of them were meant to understand until it was too late. There were moments when Brennan caught Cullum studying him with a look that felt like a threat, wrapped in curiosity. Moments when Pascal's instinct screamed at him to run, even though running wasn't an option anymore. Cullum's presence infected every decision, every conversation, every move. He walked through Port Charles like a quiet storm, gathering information, tightening control, bending everything toward a plan only he understood. And beneath it all, one truth became impossible to ignore. Cullum wasn't simply replacing Sidwell. He wasn't cleaning up the mess. He wasn't stabilizing the mission. He was positioning himself as the final authority. The one voice Brennan would kneel to. The one power Pascal couldn't escape. The one threat no one in Port Charles was prepared for. Cullum didn't come to town to observe. He came to own it. Liz and Lucas didn't hesitate for a single heartbeat when the urgent page came through. There was no time to gather their thoughts or question the tone behind the message. They simply moved, because instinct told them something far worse than a medical emergency was unfolding. And when they reached Portia, pale, shaken, clutching the edge of her desk as if the room itself was tilting beneath her, they knew their instincts had been right. This wasn't fear. This was devastation. Portia tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Liz stepped closer, steady but terrified of what she was about to hear. Lucas moved into the room with slow, careful steps, as though entering a crime scene. And in a way, he was. Because the truth that Portia finally forced out was nothing short of criminal. Drew Kane, once a symbol of resilience and integrity, had crossed a line so dark, it left all three of them struggling to make sense of it. He hadn't threatened Portia in a moment of panic. He hadn't pressured her out of desperation. He had blackmailed her with chilling precision. He had gathered information about her, deeply personal, deeply damaging information, and used it against her like a weapon, cornering her until she felt she had no choice but to obey him. The shock was immediate and suffocating. Liz felt her chest tighten as she tried to reconcile the Drew she once cared for with the man Portia described. It didn't make sense yet. At the same time, every detail matched the unraveling she had sensed in him these past months. The irritability, the paranoia, the moral fractures he tried to hide behind quiet smiles. Lucas felt the betrayal burn like acid. He had defended Drew more times than he could count, insisting the man was simply traumatized, not dangerous. But this wasn't trauma acting out. This was calculated cruelty. This was someone who knew exactly how to inflict fear and had chosen to do it anyway. Portia's voice cracked as she described the threats Drew had made, how he warned her that exposing him would cost her career, how he hinted that certain secrets about her family could accidentally go public, how he made sure she understood he had nothing left to lose and therefore had no limits. Hearing it was like being punched in the gut. Liz felt a tremor ripple through her hands, because Drew hadn't just targeted Portia. He had chosen someone he knew was vulnerable, someone he knew had everything to lose, someone he knew would break quietly rather than fight loudly. And that level of manipulation was terrifying. Lucas tried to steady Portia, but even he struggled to mask the fury in his voice. He demanded details: how long this had been happening, what Drew wanted, whether he had threatened Trina or Curtis or even Spencer by extension. And with every answer Portia gave, the situation grew darker, more twisted, more impossible to ignore. Liz paced the office, unable to stand still. She wanted to deny it, to believe Drew was incapable of this. But deep down she knew the truth. People didn't break cleanly. They fractured in jagged ways that cut everyone around them. Drew had been crumbling for months, and now the cracks were bleeding into the lives of innocent people. And Portia was just the first to speak. That realization made Liz feel sick. If Drew could blackmail Portia, who else had he cornered? Who else had he tried to control? How much damage had already been done beneath the surface? While everyone was distracted by Willow's trial and Michael's panic, Lucas finally asked the question that none of them wanted to say out loud. What exactly does he want from you? Portia swallowed hard and forced the words out. Drew wanted medical cooperation, access, quiet manipulation of patient files, the kind of favors that could reshape investigations and shift legal narratives. He wanted leverage, and Portia respected, trusted, connected was the gateway. Liz felt her heart drop, because this wasn't a man losing his mind. This was a man rebuilding his world through corruption. Lucas stared at Portia, then at Liz, then back at the floor as the truth settled in like poison. Drew wasn't spiraling. He was transforming. and not into something broken into something dangerous. The room felt too small, too heavy with consequence, because now Liz and Lucas were part of the truth, and once they knew what Drew had done, once they saw how deeply he had compromised Portia, there was no turning back. They could not unhear it, they could not ignore it, and they could not pretend Drew was still the man they once trusted. Portia clutched Liz's hand, shaking. He said, "If I tell anyone, he'll ruin me." Liz tightened her grip. "You did the right thing telling us," but inside, her stomach twisted with dread, because Drew wasn't bluffing. A man who had already crossed this line would cross another, and another, and another. Lucas exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with grim certainty. "This isn't just a personal crisis," he said. "This is criminal, and it's going to get worse." Liz nodded, her mind racing. Drew's actions wouldn't stay contained. Blackmail was never a what-I'm act. It grew, it expanded, it consumed everything in its path. And now that Liz and Lucas knew, they were inside the blast radius. Portia had lived in fear long enough. Now the fear was theirs, too. Because whatever Drew was becoming, whatever darkness had taken root inside him, it wasn't done spreading. And Portia's desperate confession was only the beginning of the explosion that was about to rip through Port Charles. Michael and Chase collided with each other like two storms forced into the same narrow space, the tension crackling before either man even spoke. Chase's voice came first, sharp, controlled, but vibrating with fury as he accused Michael of being the real shooter, the one who had pulled the trigger on Drew and cleverly let Willow take the fall. Until the truth began to unravel. The accusations sliced through the air, and Michael felt something inside him snap. For weeks he had been spiraling, suffocating under secrets, guilt, sleepless nights, and the relentless fear that every look in his direction carried suspicion. But hearing Chase, someone who once trusted him, someone married into his family, say the words out loud ignited something far darker. Michael stepped forward, every muscle tense, his eyes burning with a mixture of panic and rage. He wasn't just offended, he was cornered. Chase's certainty pushed every unstable thought inside him closer to the edge. Chase didn't back down. He pressed harder, listing the inconsistencies, the motives, the emotional fractures that made Michael look more guilty than innocent. Each point hit like a blow, and Michael felt the walls closing in. The more Chase pushed, the more Michael's control disintegrated. His breathing turned sharp, his hands trembled, and the mask he'd been desperately trying to hold together began to shatter. He lashed out, not physically, not yet, but with a fury that revealed just how unstable he had become. His voice cracked with desperation. His arguments came too fast, too loud, too defensive. Chase saw it. Chase recognized the unraveling instantly, and that only confirmed his suspicions. This confrontation was no longer just about Drew's shooting. It was about Michael cracking under pressure, Michael drowning in fear, Michael fighting ghosts that were getting louder every day. And as Chase watched him implode, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Whatever Michael was hiding, whether guilt, truth, or something in between, was reaching a breaking point. And once Michael snapped fully, Port Charles would feel the impact. Ava would not have expected Trina's trembling confession to hit her with such force. But the moment the words slipped out, Willow shot Drew. Ava felt the entire landscape of Port Charles tilt. It wasn't just shocking. It was powerful. It was leverage. It was the kind of secret that could redraw alliances and destroy entire empires, if placed in the right or wrong hands. And Ava Jerome, who had survived more betrayals, bloodshed, and battlefield negotiations than most people in the city, immediately recognized the value of what she'd just been given. Trina trusted her. Trina needed her. But Ava's mind, sharp as a blade, processed the information with ruthless speed. If Willow was the shooter, if the truth was buried beneath layers of panic and legal manipulation, then there were countless ways this revelation could shift the balance of power. And the first name that flashed through Ava's mind was Nina Reeves. Nina, who was spiraling with fear, guilt, and desperation to hold onto anything stable, would consider this information life-changing. Nina wanted a path back to her daughter. She wanted redemption. She wanted control in a world where she had lost almost all of it. And Ava saw it clearly. This truth about Willow was not just gossip. It was currency. It could buy loyalty, protection, influence. It could reshape the fragile truce between them into a strategic alliance. And Ava, who thrived in chaos, felt a dark thrill run down her spine as she considered the possibilities. Trina's voice cracked as she repeated the details she had pieced together, her fear radiating in every shaky breath. But Ava forced herself to stay calm, not cold, not dismissive, just steady enough to keep Trina talking. Because the more she learned, the more the picture came together. Michael's frantic behavior, Drew's unpredictable anger, the strange silences surrounding the case, the way certain people in town suddenly seemed too eager to change the subject. It all made sense now. Willow was guilty, truly guilty, and the Corinthos family was burying it. Ava felt the weight of that truth settle into her chest, hot and electrifying. This wasn't just scandal. This was a weapon, one that could unmake Michael, cripple Drew, protect Trina, and most importantly give Nina the one thing she had lost, an advantage. Because Nina still feared that her past mistakes had permanently cut her off from Willow, that she would always be the villain in her daughter's eyes. But Ava now saw a path to reverse the dynamic. If Willow's secret came to light, Nina wouldn't be the most hated woman in town anymore. Willow would, and that would change everything. Still, Ava couldn't act too fast. She needed time, strategy, precision. She comforted Trina, reassured her that she had done the right thing, promised her that this burden would not destroy her. But inside, Ava's thoughts churned like a storm. She wasn't cruel, she would protect Trina above all else, but she was also a survivor, a woman forged in fire. And she knew when fate handed her a blade sharp enough to carve a new future. And Nina was drowning. Ava could feel her friends slipping deeper into regret, into paranoia, into the fear that Sonny would cut her out permanently, that Willow would never forgive her, that the life she fought to build was collapsing. But now Ava could offer her something priceless. A deal, a shield, a way out. Ava imagined the moment she would pull Nina aside, her voice low, her eyes gleaming with controlled intensity. She would not offer the truth as a gift that wasn't Ava's style. She would offer it as a partnership, a mutual protection pact. Nina would regain power, Ava would gain leverage, and both of them would stand stronger against the chaos already threatening to consume Port Charles. But Ava also knew the risk. Exposing a secret like this could trigger consequences far beyond her control. Michael was already volatile. Drew was unstable. Willow, fragile and unpredictable, might shatter completely if cornered. And Sonny would inevitably be drawn into the fallout, one way or another. That was the beauty and the danger of the secret Trina had revealed. It was unpredictable, explosive, a time bomb Ava now held in her hands. Yet Ava Jerome did not fear explosions. As she hugged Trina tightly, promising her safety, Ava's eyes focused on the horizon of what was now possible. The game was changing. Alliances would shift. Loyalties would fracture. And the next move would decide who rose and who fell. For the first time in weeks, Ava felt something she thought she had lost. Control. And the moment she stepped out of that room, she knew exactly what she needed to do next. The truth about Willow wasn't just shocking, it was opportunity. And Ava Jerome never wasted an opportunity. Especially not one that could reshape the future of everyone she cared about, and destroy those who deserved it.